In the early 1300s, the Mongols had conquered almost everything they touched. China had fallen, Persia had burned, Russia had bent, India was next. And yet they never crossed the line that mattered. On this channel, we explore the quiet mechanics of history. Not legends, not myths, but the systems, decisions, and pressures that shaped outcomes long before anyone understood their meaning. This is not a story about glory. It is a story about limits. This isn't just about why the Mongols failed to conquer India. It's about why the greatest military system ever created finally met an environment it could not dominate. Why expansion stopped not because of a single battle, but because of a deeper miscalculation. And why that failure changed the future of South Asia forever. By the late 13th century, the Mongol Empire had become something unprecedented in human history. Not merely a conquering force, but a mobile system of violence, logistics, intelligence, and discipline. From the grasslands of Mongolia, armies had moved thousands of miles without collapsing. They crossed deserts, mountains, frozen rivers. They defeated empires that had stood for centuries. Their advantage was not numbers, it was structure. Every Mongol campaign was built on speed, coordination, and adaptability. Their cavalry lived off the land. Their command hierarchy allowed rapid decisions. Their intelligence networks were unmatched. When Mongol scouts entered a region, they mapped it in advance. They studied supply routes, political fractures, rivalries. They exploited weaknesses before armies ever clashed. Most empires fell not in battle but beforehand. And by 1290, the Mongols were everywhere. The Yuan dynasty ruled China, the Ilkhanate dominated Persia. The Golden Horde controlled the Eurasian steppe. To the south lay India. From a distance, it looked vulnerable. The Indian subcontinent had wealth beyond measure, cities dense with population, agricultural surplus, trade routes flowing from the Indian Ocean to Central Asia. And politically, it was divided. The Delhi Sultanate ruled northern India, but it was not an ancient empire. It was young, still consolidating power, still dealing with internal revolts. To the Mongols this looked familiar: fragmented authority, rich targets, a frontier that could be tested with raids. So they began probing. At first, they came as raiders, small contingents crossing the Hindu Kush, testing defenses, measuring response times. They expected fear. They expected fragmentation. They expected the same pattern they had seen everywhere else. They were wrong. The critical shift came not with a grand invasion but with resistance that refused to collapse. The Delhi Sultanate, unlike many Mongol targets, did not underestimate the threat. It did not dismiss raids as border disturbances. It did not rely solely on fortifications or diplomacy. Instead, it prepared for repetition. This was the difference. Mongol warfare depended on decisive collapse. Cities that surrendered early survived. Those that resisted were annihilated. But the Delhi Sultanate did something unusual. It absorbed damage without unraveling. Sultans like Alauddin Khalji understood something fundamental: the Mongols would return, not once, not twice, again and again. So instead of chasing them into the mountains, Delhi focused on endurance. Armies were reorganized, supply systems strengthened, frontier defenses hardened not to block invasion, but to delay it. Every Mongol raid was met with resistance that was measured, not reckless. Losses were accepted. Time was bought. And time was the one thing the Mongols could not afford to waste. The Mongols now faced a dilemma they were not used to. India was not open steppe, it was dense, hot, seasonal. Monsoon rains turned roads into mud. Rivers swelled unpredictably. Pasturelands were limited. Mongol horses central to their warfare required grazing space. India did not provide it in abundance near the frontier. Every campaign became logistically expensive. At the same time, the Delhi Sultanate refused decisive engagement on Mongol terms. They did not chase feigned retreats. They did not scatter forces in panic. They learned. Each Mongol incursion taught Delhi more about their tactics. Each defense grew tighter. And critically, Delhi had something the Mongols struggled to neutralize: depth. Even if frontier regions were damaged, the core remained intact. Cities rebuilt, taxes resumed, armies replenished. For the Mongols, this was inefficient warfare. Their system was designed for rapid expansion, not prolonged pressure against a state that refused to fall apart. So they adjusted. Raids became harsher, massacres increased. Psychological warfare intensified. Still, the Sultanate endured. Not because it was stronger, but because it was stubborn. By the early 14th century, the pattern was clear. The Mongols could invade India. They could win battles. They could devastate border regions. But they could not hold ground. Every campaign cost more than it gained. Supply lines stretched, horses weakened, armies lingered too long in hostile terrain. Meanwhile, Delhi's leadership adapted its systems. Standing armies were expanded. Revenue reforms ensured soldiers were paid regularly. Fortresses were positioned to slow, not stop, Mongol movement. This was not heroic resistance. It was bureaucratic survival. The Mongols, facing pressures elsewhere in their empire, made a calculation. India was not worth permanent conquest. Not because it was unconquerable, but because it did not fit the Mongol system. So the invasions slowed, then stopped. The frontier hardened into a boundary that would never fully break. The failure of the Mongols in India had consequences far beyond the battlefield. It preserved the political evolution of the subcontinent. It allowed the Delhi Sultanate to mature rather than collapse. It prevented India from being absorbed into the Mongol imperial structure. More importantly, it marked the first clear limit of Mongol expansion caused not by defeat but by incompatibility. India did not defeat the Mongols by outmatching them, it outlasted them. This lesson echoed through history. Empires do not always fall when they are beaten. Sometimes they stop when the cost of winning becomes too high. The Mongols had reached that point. The Mongols failed in India not because they were weak but because their system had reached its edge, and India, through endurance and adaptation, became the place where expansion quietly ended. If you want to explore more moments where history turned not on battles but on decisions, systems, and restraint, tell us which story we should cover next. If this video gave you something to think about, consider liking, subscribing, and staying with us for the next chapter of history.